talking about leadership in this quick little segment. We're going to talk about behavioral approaches, so leadership behaviors, as well as decision-making styles that leaders can take part in. And there's 3 of those. So we're just going to do a couple of quick slides. So when the leadership literature started over 100 years ago, when we started looking at it scientifically, not we as in me, but people who were studying it, they were looking at traits, things that were inherent to the person, things that could be explained by the person, him or herself, typically a him at that point. So things such as kindness or intelligence or height or anything else that was inherent internal to the person. That research came to the conclusion that that didn't really seem to work. We had a lot of different traits that seemed to actually predict leadership or leadership effectiveness, meaning being a good leader, a successful leader. However, there were so many different traits that you couldn't pinpoint it down to a few and say, if I have these 3, or we find a leader that has these 5, then that should be a great, effective, successful leader. We never came to those conclusions. There was just too many traits and it was unwieldy. So instead of looking at traits, things internal to the person, there was a new research questions around mid-century, last century. And they said, instead of traits, we can look at behaviors. So things that people actually do, their action, their visible actions. And so there were 2 groups of researchers at the time. They came from Ohio State, as well as University of Michigan. So we had people in Ohio at Ohio State University, and we also had people from University of Michigan. And they came to similar but not exactly the same conclusions. They were a little bit different in the methodology of how these behaviors could be explained or how they seem to work in the workplace. But at the general level, they had the same research conclusions. And those research conclusions are listed on this page here. So out of all of the different types of behaviors, these researchers said behaviors can be categorized into 2 different types: task-oriented as well as people-oriented. So basically they are saying you're either focused on the things that needs to be done within an organization, productivity, so tasks, projects, actions, things that actually produce a service or a product. And we also call this initiating structure. So that's a different terminology. If you see on the exam something called initiating structure, we mean task-focused behaviors. So task-focused behaviors, these are behaviors that means we are structuring the roles of the subordinates. So what they're supposed to do, we provide them with instructions, and we behave in ways that will increase the performance of the group. So task-oriented behaviors are directives given to employees to get things done and to ensure that organizational goals are met. So these are productivity. So if you are a task-oriented leader, you tend to have higher levels of productivity, not necessarily happiness, but productivity. On the other side of the spectrum, then, we have leaders that focus on the people, and we also call these consideration. So if you see consideration on the exam, we mean people-oriented behaviors. So these are behaviors that include showing concern for the employee feelings and treating people with dignity and respect. People-oriented leaders genuinely care about the well-being of their employees, and they demonstrate their concern in their actions and decisions. So typically with people-oriented leader behaviors, people are more happy, they're more satisfied. Again, not necessarily more productive, but definitely more happy. So we can look at task-oriented and people-oriented on a graph like this, right? So we might have task, high task here, and we might have high people on this axis right here, right? So let's see if we can find a different color. Whichever, that one will be great, right? So we can make this a 2 by 2. So you might be in a place where you have low, high, as well as low and high. So if you are in this quadrant, you would be low task, low people. We would say that you're just a bad leader and you shouldn't be there. You might be in the low people, high task category, where you're going to see productivity and miserable people, right? High task performance, they can be productive and unhappy. And over here, they can be very happy, but not productive because it's low productivity. So really, this is the place where you want to be, where you have high task focus as well as high people focus. So that is the ideal quadrant to find yourself in. In terms of leader decision making, so we can look at behaviors, and communications and making decisions is one aspect of behaviors. So there's 3 different categories or ways of making decisions that we can look at for leaders, and we have them on this slide here. So we have the autocratic, democratic, and what's called laissez-faire, which is French, and it means about let go. So the autocratic decision maker is a leader that makes the decision by him or herself. They are not asking anybody else. They're not letting people to have voice necessarily into the decision. It's an autocratic, top-down, the leader decides. The democratic decision making is exactly what a democracy is. So here we have employees actually participating in the making of the decision, and people tend to be more happy, but we don't necessarily see better decisions. We see higher level of happiness, but not necessarily better decisions. In laissez-faire, we are just letting it go. We are leaving the employees alone, and we let the employees make the best decisions that they can. So here the leader is very little, if at all, involved in the decision making, and they provide minimum guidance and involvement in the decision. That's going to wrap it for this super quick leadership topic.